Every year, for a window of just a few weeks in May, the highest mountain on Earth briefly lowers its guard, and hundreds of people stake their lives on that window not closing before they make it back down. Mount Everest stands at 8,848 meters, the single highest point on the surface of the Earth. Getting from base camp to its summit means crossing a glacier that shifts and fractures beneath your feet every day, climbing a 1,100-meter wall of near-vertical ice, and spending hours in a zone where the human body cannot sustain itself. Today, we follow that route, from start to finish, camp by camp, obstacle by obstacle, and look at exactly what it takes. And when we reach the final stretch, the section where over 80% of all deaths on this mountain occur, you will understand why most climbers who have stood on that summit describe it not as the greatest moment of their lives, but simply as the moment they knew they still had to get back down. Everest Base Camp sits at 5,364 meters on the southern edge of the Khumbu Glacier in Nepal. That altitude alone is already higher than any peak in the contiguous United States. And from here, the actual summit is still 3,484 meters above you, roughly the same vertical distance as flying from sea level to the cruising altitude of a small aircraft. No expedition moves from this point without first holding a puja ceremony, a Sherpa tradition in which monks conduct prayers and burn juniper offerings to ask the mountain for safe passage. Every serious climbing team participates, without exception, because everyone who has spent time at the base of this mountain understands that it has ended the ambitions of people far more experienced than them. The full cost of an Everest expedition permits, Sherpas, oxygen, equipment, logistics, and travel runs between $50,000 and $160,000 US per climber. The Nepalese government permit alone costs $15,000. That buys the right to attempt the mountain. Nothing more. Climbers leave base camp at around 3 in the morning. The timing is not incidental. As the sun rises, the ice of the Khumbu Icefall warms and becomes even less stable than it already is. The icefall is a 2-kilometer section of the Khumbu Glacier, cascading down a steep cliff face, fracturing and shifting continuously as it descends. The glacier itself moves up to 1.2 meters every single day. A crossing that was stable at midnight can be an open crevasse by afternoon. Seracs towers of glacial ice that can reach the height of a 12-story building loom above the route and can collapse without any warning at any time of day. Crevasses drop more than 100 meters, many hidden beneath thin snow bridges that look identical to solid ground. Climbers cross them on aluminium ladders lashed together end to end, balancing in crampons above drops that would swallow a person without a trace. At least 47 climbers have died in the Khumbu Icefall since the first Everest expedition in 1953. More fatalities than any other section of the mountain. In April 2014, a single serac collapse triggered an avalanche that killed 16 Sherpa guides in one morning while they were preparing the route for that season's expeditions. In pre-dawn temperatures that fall to minus 20 degrees Celsius, every crossing takes between 3 and 6 hours. Experienced Sherpas can clear it in under 2. And every climber on the South Col route must cross it not once, but multiple times across the weeks of acclimatization rotations. Above the icefall, the terrain flattens into something that looks, from a distance, like relief. The western Khum is a wide glacial valley, enclosed on 3 sides by the walls of Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse. It looks like a place to rest. It is not. The valley walls act as a solar trap, reflecting sunlight off the snow from every angle at once. Temperatures here can swing from minus 20 degrees Celsius before sunrise to over 30 degrees by midday. A 50-degree shift in a matter of hours. Climbers have suffered frostbite and heat exhaustion on the same day, in the same valley, Camp 2 waits at the far end at 6,400 meters, the last flat ground on the entire route. Above Camp 2, the Lhotse face begins. And it begins immediately. This is a continuous wall of blue glacial ice, approximately 1,100 meters tall, angled at between 40 and 50 degrees. There is no warm-up section, no gradual transition. Climbers ascend it using crampons and ice axes, clipped into fixed ropes bolted directly into the ice face. One uncontrolled slip means a fall of hundreds of meters with nothing to stop it. Camp 3 is pitched at 7,162 meters on tent platforms physically hacked into the ice. There is no flat ground. Tents are secured with ice screws driven into the wall. Climbers sleep anchored to the mountain, with solid ice above and open air directly beneath them. At this altitude, hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, begins distorting judgment, slowing movement, and quietly dismantling the decision-making that keeps people. Camp 4 sits on the South Col at 7,906 meters, a wind-stripped plateau of bare rock and ice between Everest and Lhotse. Above 8,000 meters, the human body crosses into what climbers call the death zone, a threshold it cannot recover from during a single expedition. The air holds roughly 1/3 of the oxygen available at sea level. No degree of acclimatization changes that ceiling. The body here is not adapting, it is deteriorating. Cells begin dying, cognition degrades. Frostbite can destroy fingers and toes within minutes of exposure. The wind on the South Col regularly exceeds 80 kilometers per hour. At the summit, gusts have been recorded at 280 kilometers per hour, stronger than the most powerful Atlantic. Teams rest here for a handful of hours before rising at midnight to begin the summit push. The weather window on Everest is brutally narrow, a matter of days each May, when the jet stream pulls away from the summit long enough for a safe attempt. Missing that window means descending and waiting another full year. In darkness, climbers follow fixed ropes up the southeast ridge. After 3 to 4 hours of ascending inside the death zone, they reach the balcony, a narrow flat shelf at 8,400 meters where teams switch oxygen canisters and rest for minutes, not longer. Every minute spent motionless at this altitude burns reserves that will not return before the summit. From here, the route continues to the south summit at 8,749 meters, the first point on the entire climb from which the true summit is visible. What lies between them is 300 meters of heavily corniced ridge, with a drop of over 2,400 meters into Nepal on the left side, and a 3,000-meter fall into Tibet on the right. Where the Hillary Step once stood, a 12-meter near vertical rock wall at 8,790 meters that climbers had to negotiate individually, one at a time. The 2015 earthquake altered the structure of the rock considerably. What remains is now a steep snow slope, still demanding, still fatal if mishandled, but no longer the distinctive technical rock pitch it had been for decades. In temperatures between -30 and -40 degrees Celsius, with wind chill lowering that further, with a mind running at a fraction of its normal capacity, and a body that has been moving without adequate oxygen for over 8 hours, every step of that final stretch is deliberate, slow, and costs something that cannot be replaced on the way up. The summit of Everest is roughly the size of a dining table. After 40 to 70 days on the mountain, up to 20 hours of continuous climbing on summit day, crossing a glacier that reshapes itself beneath your feet, scaling a 1,100-meter wall of ice, and spending hours where the atmosphere cannot support human life, that is what waits at the top. Most climbers spend fewer than 30 minutes there, at 8,848 meters. Because the summit is not the end of the climb. Every step taken upward is a step that still has to be taken back down. And more than 80% of all deaths on Everest happen during the descent. Since 1953, more than 12,000 people have stood on this summit. As of 2024, 335 of them never came back down. The mountain has not changed. The window stays open for a few weeks every year. And every single season, the queue at base camp gets longer.